Hello and welcome to General Psychology, Sci 101. My name is Professor Marini and I will be your instructor for this course. My office number is 235 in the South Hall. My email is smarini@capecod.edu, which is the best way to contact me. You can also leave a message on my machine, which can be reached by calling the general number at the college at extension 4515. As I'm sure you know, this is a hybrid course, meaning that we're only going to meet once a week at the college on Friday from 1 to 1:50, and most of the work actually is going to be done online on Moodle. And of course you should have access to Moodle. You should be familiar with it. You should be able to navigate Moodle properly. Once you're on Moodle, I need you to pay careful attention to the syllabus, which includes all the information necessary for the course, including the dates of the material, of the exams, the value of the different evaluations, and as well as the attendance policies. In terms of the material, we are of course going to begin with chapter 1, and we're going to talk about what psychology is. And psychology is defined as the scientific study of behavior and mental processes, where the mind is how people and other living organisms perceive, think, and feel, while behavior, on the other hand, is what people and other living organisms do. Now, originally psychology was really focusing on the processing of the mind, but psychologists quickly realized that the mind is not easily accessible, and therefore behavior, the analysis of behavior that is used in order to understand what's going on in someone's mind. There are 4 goals of scientific psychology, and these goals are to describe a particular behavior that is of interest to the psychologist, to explain that particular phenomena that is being observed by using theories and hypotheses. Based on the theory and the hypothesis, the psychologist will be able to make prediction about the behavior, what is going to happen, and if those prediction holds when an experiment is performed on a particular topic, then the information gathered is used to control behavior and mental processes. Let me give you an example of this. Let's assume that as a psychologist you are interested in violent behavior in children, and therefore you might describe the fact that some children act more violently than others, and you're trying to explain why that happens. And you might explain that phenomena by using a theory which is called observational learning, and it's based on the fact that it is believed that some behavior is learned by observing similar behavior. So the hypothesis will be that children who observe violent behavior will act more violently than children who do not observe violent behavior. So your prediction would be exactly what I just described in your hypothesis, and you need to test the prediction experimentally. So you will set up an experiment where you will have some children observe violent behavior and other children do not observe that violent behavior, and then the behavior of those children will be evaluated to see if in fact the behavior of children who observe violent behavior changes in that those children will be acting more violently. Now, if that holds true, if the predictions are correct, and in fact children who observe violent behavior act more violently than children who do not observe violent behavior, then the final goal of psychology will be to control behavior and mental process, in this case control violent behavior in children, and parents will be advised not to let their children observe violent behavior that is inappropriate for their age, because otherwise they might act more violently. So in general, theories are a set of principles that try to explain a phenomena, like for example observational learning, while a hypothesis, on the other hand, is more specific. It's a preliminary guess about how to interpret and explain what is being observed by the psychologist. Now, what do psychologists do? They do research, they practice, or they teach, like I'm doing here. Now, research divides into pure research, which is research for the sake of knowledge, trying to find out how things work in nature. And the second type of research is applied, where a particular goal is sought. So, for example, treating a particular disorder would be applied research, while finding out why the behavior occurs to begin with would be pure. Now, practice is the other field of what psychologists do, which primarily involved a psychologist using a particular type of therapy in a therapeutic setting to help some individuals with some disorders, and teaching, that's obvious, and some psychologists actually combine some of this, like for example do research and teach at the same time. Now, psychology is a very vast field. As you can see in this slide, there are over 50 different divisions within the American Psychological Association, which is the largest association of psychologists in the world. And this different division focus on different aspects of psychology: general psychology, experimental psychology, clinical psychology, school psychology, health psychology, media psychology, and so on. So psychology is expanding at an exponential level in today's society, and basically almost any aspects of society can be linked to psychology in one way or another. Now, how do psychologists study behavior and mental processes? And in order to study a particular phenomena, the psychologist first needs to identify a sample, which is a segment of the population, where the population is the entire targeted group. Now, sometimes the population can be the entire population of human beings on Earth. On the other hand, in some cases, psychologists or researchers can focus on more distinct population, like for example, population of children in the United States, if that's a population that is targeted. Now, there's a critical aspect of the relationship between the sample and the population, and that is that the sample needs to be representative of a population in order to allow for generalization. If a psychologist selects a sample that is inappropriate, that because of the characteristics of those individuals in a sample, then the results cannot be generalized. Now, what is the best way of selecting a sample from a population? And the most basic way of doing it is to select subjects randomly from a population, where each member of a population has an equal chance of being selected. Now, in some cases, random sample is impossible because individuals who are chosen do not want to participate in a particular study. So in that case, you would want to use volunteers. But when you're using volunteers, you have to be careful because those volunteers might be biased. That is, they might already have some idea about what the results might be in their own view, and therefore they might behave differently and produce some errors in the results that you are obtaining. Now, in some cases, when the study focuses on particular variables, particular subgroups might be selected. For example, if a psychologist has a reason to believe that age might be an important variable when studying, let's say, violent behavior, as we have discussed earlier, then the subgroups needs to be represented proportionally to the population. So, for example, if in a population 20% of the individuals are between the ages of 10 and 20, then in the stratified sample that is obtained, that sample needs to have the same proportion of individuals between the ages of 10 and 20. Now, what kind of methods of observation can we employ? We can ask subjects to provide their opinion through a survey. And surveys are used to collect information typically that cannot be observed directly. Survey allow the researcher to gather a large number of data relatively easily and quickly. So, for example, political polls are surveys or questionnaires. So they're relatively inexpensive and easy methods, with the problem, however, being that the researcher can never be sure of the true nature of the answers in a survey. So, in other words, subjects sometimes can lie and provide the wrong information. In some cases, subjects carries particular characteristics that are very interesting, that are unique, that are very potentially useful in determining particular psychological phenomena. For example, savants, these individuals who have this amazing ability in, let's say, memory or musical ability or visual ability. You might have individuals who listen to a piece of music once and they're immediately after they're able to go to a piano and play that piece of music. Now, you would want to study that particular individual to figure out what their particular mental characteristics are, and this is called a case study. Now, the problem with the case study, even though they provide very interesting results, is that they are often difficult to generalize. So you have trouble generalizing your findings to a larger group of people, to a population. And then we have naturalistic observation, where subjects are observed in their natural environment. So nothing is changed, nothing is introduced into the situation, so it is an unobtrusive measure where the actual behavior is observed in its natural state. And why is that important? Because sometimes an experimenter, an observer, when observing a particular behavior, changes that behavior. So you can see here an experimenter observing the behavior of children in a classroom behind a one-way mirror. So these children are not able to see the observer behind the mirror. Why? Well, because if they would know that someone is observing them, they would behave differently. Once data are collected, what are we going to do with them? Are we going to evaluate the results by conducting a particular analysis, and depending on the method that is used, you can either conduct a correlational study or an experimental study. In a correlational study, two variables are measured and their degree of association between those two variables is calculated. So you can then obtain a correlation coefficient, which is the degree of association between these two variables, and this correlation coefficient can range between +1 and -1, so all the numbers in between. Now, this number and the sign expresses the strength as well as the direction of the relationship between variables, meaning that the closest the correlation coefficient is to +1, the strongest the positive correlation. If a number is closer to -1, then there is a strong negative correlation. If a number is close to 0, which is in between, then there is no correlation between the two variables. Positive correlation means that the two variables are changing in the same direction. As one increases, the other one increases. As one variable decreases, the other one also decreases. An example of that would be the number of hours that students study for an exam and the grade they get. The more hours, the higher the grade. The less hour, the lower the grade. So that would be a positive correlation. If two variables are negatively correlated, yielding a correlation coefficient which is closer to -1, then as one variable increases, the other one decreases. So for example, you might want to think of a negative correlation between the mileage in the odometer of a car and its value. So the greater the mileage on a car, typically the lower the value. As one variable goes up, the other one goes down. If a car has only a few miles on it, then its value will be higher. Right? So that's a negative correlation. However, one thing that you want to remember, very important, is that correlation is not causation. This is an example of a positive correlation. This is called the scatter diagram, and these are all data points that are collected, and a positive correlation is found between intelligent test scores and grade point average. So the greater the IQ, the greater the GPA, or the greater the GPA, the greater the IQ. So one variable allows for the prediction of the other by having these two variables changing in the same direction. On the right side, you have here an example of a negative correlation between level of stress and the functioning of the immune system. Higher level of stress are correlated with lower level of functioning in the immune system. You see, for example, this data point here where this individual scores relatively high on the level of stress and the immune system functioning is low. So as one variable increases, the other one decreases. Always remember though that correlation is not causation. And in this slide you can see three possible explanations of the positive correlation between two variables. Let's assume that we find a positive correlation between IQ, or being smart, and the number of friends that an individual has. So that the greater the IQ, the more the friends that an individual might possess. Now, one researcher might explain that association by saying that being smart makes people develop more friendships. The same exact results of a correlation between these two variables could be explained though by saying that it's the number of friends that an individual has that makes them smarter. So one case, being smart makes the individual develop more friendship. The second explanation is the number of friends that you have that makes you smarter. And in the third explanation, as you see at the bottom, is that a third variable, which is the parents, in this case, who are warm and supportive, make children develop more friendship, and at the same time makes children become smarter. So the changes that are observed in the relationship between IQ, or being smart, and a number of friends is really caused by a third variable, and there is no causal relationship between the two variables that are observed. The only way to establish a causal relationship between two variables is to perform an experiment. And in a true experiment, there are two variables that are primarily important: the independent variable and the dependent variable. The independent variable is the one that's manipulated by the experimenter. It's the one that is changed by the experimenter. On the other hand, the dependent variable is the variable that is measured by the researcher, by the experimenter. So one variable is changed, and those changes that are made in the independent variable are thought to produce the changes that you're observing in the variable that you're measuring, in a dependent variable. So, for example, if we argue that watching violent television makes children act more violently, the type of television is going to be the independent variable, and the violent behavior in children is going to be the dependent variable, what is being measured. In an experimental method, there has to be at least two groups or more. One being the experimental group. Experimental group is the group that is being administered the independent variable, and a second group being the control group, the one that is not being administered the independent variable, where things are kept constant. In some cases, experimenters use a placebo in order to counteract some are known as, appropriately enough, placebo effects, which are the power of the mind over your body. Let's assume you give an individual a treatment for a particular disorder, even though the treatment might not be effective at all. By having this individual take a pill at a regular basis, makes them feel better, because they might feel that they're doing something positive to themselves about their particular condition. So in that case, you need to use a placebo, which in a lot of situations is simply a sugar pill. A pill that doesn't contain any active ingredient, and it's simply used to keep track of these placebo effects, the power of your mind over your body. Now, of course, in the case where you're using a placebo effect, subject needs to be blind to the condition. They are given a container with pills, and they're not told whether those pills are actually drugs or placebo. So they're blind to the condition that they're in. In some situation, you might even want to use a double blind, which means that not only the subject doesn't know what they're taking, but the experimenter, especially the one that evaluates the subject, is not aware of who's taking what. And this is done in order to control for possible observational bias. If an observer, an experimenter, is aware that an individual is taking a drug while another one is not, this observer might be more inclined to find positive effects on the group that they know is taking the drug. What can we do to subjects that are used in a particular research? Can we do anything we want to them? And actually, it might be surprising to you, but until relatively recently, researchers could do pretty much what they wanted to subjects. And it is only recently that different institutions began to use these boards that are called IRB, that stands for Institutional Review Board, in order to make sure that experimenters are not harming subjects. So nowadays, this ethical review committee called IRB needs to approve research before it is done. And what these boards do is that they make sure that, first of all, no harm is done to subjects, that there is a scientific integrity, meaning that the research will be useful in finding out something important scientifically. Make sure that subjects are not harmed psychologically, so to promote individual dignity. Um, Before the researcher can use subjects, they have to have subjects sign what are called informed consent, and some of you might have been exposed to these informed consent forms already, and are asked to sign consent before anything experimentally is done. Confidentiality needs to be maintained, meaning that the results needs to be kept confidential. Deception typically cannot be used, meaning that the subject cannot be lied to. The subject cannot be told that the experiment is focusing on a particular aspect of human behavior, while in reality it is focusing on something else. In some cases, deception is necessary because, as I mentioned before, when we were discussing naturalistic observation, if the subject knows that something specific is being observed, then they are going to behave differently. So in that particular situation, then subjects need to be told that something else is being observed. There's a particular landmark experiment that was conducted, and we will discuss it later when we talk about social psychology. And in that particular experiment, obedience was targeted. So the researcher was interested in determining how subjects obey particular order. Of course, if you think about that situation, if you ask an individual to obey your order, that individual, and you're specifically telling them that you are studying that particular phenomena, then that individual is going to behave differently. They are not going to obey whatever it is that you're telling them to do, because they know that that behavior is what is being observed. So in that landmark experiment that I was talking about, what they did is that the experimenter told the subject that learning was the behavior that was studied, and not obedience, so that obedience as a behavior was allowed to occur naturally. However, whenever deception is used, subject needs to be debriefed. That is, immediately after the experiment, subject needs to be told what were the exact focus of what was the exact focus of the research. Now, how about animal research? Oftentimes, researchers, psychologists, as well as other scientists, use animals. Now, obviously, they haven't signed the consent form that, let's say, allowed the researcher to implant a particular device in their brain. What are the parameters surrounding animal research? Can we do anything we want to animals? And similarly to humans, the answer is no. We cannot do anything we want to animals. There are particular boards designed to approve animal research, and animals can be used in research oftentimes where the research can be too harmful or potentially dangerous for humans. So when you want to determine, for example, the negative effects of particular cancerogenic elements in our environment, we don't want to expose human to that particular deleterious variable. So animals are used instead. And animals therefore may be harmed. However, when there is no alternative, meaning that if a researcher can use a computer program to determine a particular outcome, then they should not needlessly harm animals as well. And also there must be some benefits of the research to justify the harm. So the research must be valuable enough to allow for the animals being sacrificed in most cases for that particular research. Okay, but we will discuss a little bit more about this in class, and I'll looking forward to meeting you all at our first meeting.